Okay, Madam President, I've started the recording.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to turn this meeting over to our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Padilla.
Thank you, Madam President, and good evening, everyone. We hope that you are in good spirits and in good health. Tonight, we have several presentations for you to give you an update as to where the district is at in its planning. And so we're going to go ahead and jump right into it so that way we can engage in rich discussion. So I'm just going to present my screen in a second. All right, so you should be able to see my screen. And so consistently with what we've done from the spring, as we have every board meeting, we've provided the board and the community an update on Operation Reopen. Very specifically, we're going to highlight the following 6 areas as it relates to reopening schools. When we were submitting our plan to New York State around how we would increase our outreach to students that we may be having difficulty reaching, I have to say, the feedback that we received in the spring that the board very much wanted was around how much students were engaging during the spring. And the feedback was critical, but very necessary. And that was, it was hit or miss. In some cases, students were showing up. In many cases, they weren't. And very specifically, there were close to 2,000 students that were not making contact whatsoever. So we enacted this strategy of the street engagement teams as an extra outreach to connect with our students and families to let them know the importance of making sure during the month of September, while it's virtual, that they get on and connect with their teachers and do their work and have their attendance accounted for. So last week, 191 home visits were conducted. And as part of our annual walkthroughs, we actually saw one particular team that was out on the street trying to make contact with families, and 101 contacts were actually made. And this is something that we're just going to continue to do to make sure we have all of our scholars participating. So as it relates to attendance, because this is something the board wanted to update on, again, when you compare this to the spring, we are doing much, much better. But I think you would agree with me that we obviously want to be 90% or higher. And so we're moving there, we're getting there. In some schools, we are at 90, and others we're over 90. And obviously to have an overall rate of 84, that means we do have a number of schools that are below that. And then we wanted to just provide additional information as to what this means to certain populations of students, right? And so when you see 79% of our Ls getting on, that should be a sign of what additional outreach needs to take place specifically for our English language learners. And then for our students with disabilities, our exceptional learners, they're at 81%. So both of these two groups are lower than the district average, which I would say to you indicates that we need to keep our eye on this. We need to stay focused. We need to make sure our outreach, both by the school and by the district, in collaboration with community-based organizations, continues to stay focused, continues to stay intentional. And I expect these numbers to continue to go up. Quick update on athletics. I will say, I had a very phenomenal town hall meeting this morning with students, and they were very interested in wanting to know about clubs, extracurriculars, and sports. So a lot of information recently over the last 2 weeks has come out of New York State that has trickled down to each of the different sections. As you know, Newburgh is part of Section 9, athletics. And the decision at this point from a Section 9 standpoint, which not only sits in Orange County. All right, so this is a section that goes across several counties. Winter sports will start November 30th, and then the fall season will begin And right now there's an anticipated timeline of somewhere in the beginning of March, and then proceeded or followed by spring sports. So it does appear at this time that all 3 seasons will be able to compete and participate. However, based on the moving around of the fall season, they will be modified, right? So to all our students who are listening, to our families who are listening this evening, it is the section's intent to move forward with athletics for this year. And we will be following the reorganized seasons as it's laid out here. I'm excited to announce that we are fully one-to-one K-12. And I want to say we're pre-K-12, but I won't do that just yet until I can confirm that the delivery is in district. And that is the expectation based on what's been communicated to us, that we should expect pre-K devices in district this week. And we won't make that announcement formally until that is in fact the case. So at this point, to the families who don't have a device yet, you've been getting robocalls. The distribution times and dates and locations have been provided. Please go to the distribution site so that way you can get your brand new device. All right, so transitioning back, if you remember a few weeks ago, I said that I would make a formal announcement on September 29th. And so anticipating September 29th, I did want to provide the board with an update as to what some of our thinking is at this point. So as we look at transitioning back from remote, and specifically what phase 2 would look like. Right now, phase 2, beginning October 5th, would entail pre-K, K1, 2, grade 6, and grade 9. Now, I have gotten questions around when the subsequent phases would begin. And again, I'm going to say what I've been saying for the past several weeks. We are monitoring, observing, and studying what's happening across the region. Based on the data that we're collecting at this point, with the schools that have already gone in person, we are going to move forward with phase 2, which again is October 5th. We do not have a date yet for phases 3 and phase 4. Those decisions will be made at a later date, most likely in October, once we have actually transitioned students. So we don't want to get ahead of ourselves and start announcing other phases until we get our footing. And because this is all about learning and not perfection, but progress, we need to study and look at what we did well for the transition of phase 2, areas that we can improve, and then we'll make a decision for when phase 3 and 4 would start. And again, that could be the following week, that could be 2 weeks later, or it could be at the end of the month. So I think what we're trying to demonstrate is we want to give you as much advance notice as possible. And that's why we're talking about this tonight, 2 weeks in advance of October 5th. So that way, one, we can talk to families, talk to the Board of Education, talk to our faculty and staff, talk to students, etc. Let's take a look at some of the thinking as of today. So you'll see in the presentation for this evening, there's 2 different kinds of hybrid. There is a hybrid that takes into account asynchronous Mondays. Now, naturally, you're thinking, why Monday over Wednesday? And there's a lot of valid reasons for that. One, there are more holidays on a Monday. And so as all of you have already indicated to us, we need to be concerned about the COVID slide. And the fact that children have been out of school for months now. And we need more instructional time, not less. So clearly, by moving it to Monday and having that be asynchronous, we're better to maximize the rest of the week. Another real key important piece that we have to consider is that when you do lose instructional time, in this case, when there's a holiday, we also lose opportunities to provide related services, which have legal ramifications when you don't provide them. So for those 2 reasons, having a asynchronous Monday should be something that should be taken into account. So in this case, it would be asynchronous for students, which what we've been hearing, and a lot of this is being driven by what we're hearing from students and teachers, is that students are spending a lot of time in front of the screen. So there's a lot of screen time. And I think we can certainly engage in a conversation as to how healthy that is. Providing the asynchronous time allows for students to catch up on work, allows them to access videos that teachers have produced, allows them even time to check in with teachers, allows them perhaps less screen time and more opportunity to create their schedule for the day. You can see what in-person on the left and what fully remote would entail. And again, we're only fully remote as of right now through the first semester. A decision as to the second semester has not been made and won't be made until later in the semester. But in this case, just to be super, super clear, the blue cohort would come in on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then you can see here, this is live in-person instruction for blue cohort students only, while synchronous instruction happens remotely for the gold cohort. And then obviously there would be the change to gold cohort on Thursday and Friday. On the calendar, as one of the things we are trying to, closely monitor is how many days of instruction are we gaining or losing as a result of calendar days throughout the entire year. So here you can see in the month of October, the blue cohort and the gold cohort, there's not a disadvantage to any one cohort. And then again, when you see November, we obviously don't want to shortchange any particular cohort, and that is something we would have to monitor throughout the entire year. Another model would be to stay with the AABB, but have Monday and Tuesday be when the blue cohort comes in, and then the gold cohort being Thursday and Friday. And again, the same expectations here would apply. Live instruction for some, remote synchronous instruction for others. Expectations for in-person and remote, again, here stays the same. There are advantages and disadvantages to just about every model we've studied. And even in these two models, there's advantages and disadvantages. Here, you don't lose out on instructional days, but right now we have our food service program being delivered on Wednesdays. So again, as I've been communicating with our stakeholders, there's no perfect plan. There's going to be pros and cons to whatever we end up deciding. For those who have a comfort feeling of saying, well, Wednesday could be a day for extra cleaning. Well, that is true for the previous model as well, because what we would essentially say, sorry, I'm going the wrong direction. What we are essentially going to say in this model is that on Wednesdays, everyone has to leave during dismissal, so that way our buildings and grounds crew can get in right after dismissal on a staggered schedule and be able to get into the buildings just like every other district that's doing this, in order to use our Clorox machines and be able to spray and clean before the next cohort comes in. All right, let me make sure I'm going in the right direction. All right, so again, two variations of the hybrid AABB, one looking at a Monday asynchronous, another looking at a Wednesday asynchronous. And again, this is what the Wednesday calendar for asynchronous would look like. All right, the next piece of this relates to just feedback and input. And thank you to, at this point, the close to 100 students that have participated every Tuesday in the town halls. We're going to do another one next Tuesday. And some of the things that they have expressed, and today they had a lot of phenomenal questions around masks, specifically when they can take a break, the types of masks they're allowed to use, students who have special needs, eating in classrooms, sports, too much screen time, not enough passing time between, and recorded lessons. We will be putting out a parent survey. We're hoping by Friday, if not Monday at the latest. And if you recall, we indicated this way back in August that we wanted to continue to get family, parent, and guardian feedback as to how this is working, because obviously this is the first time we've ever done this. So to continue to get that feedback would only help us to improve our plans. And we have a teacher focus group that's coming up where we're going to get input from our faculty and staff as well. So again, a continuation of getting multiple stakeholder feedback so that way we can continue to solidify our plans. And we just want to continue to stress what should be obvious at this point, but critically important to mitigate the spread. And that is, we all got to do our part to mask up. And so thank you everyone for your diligence. I know sometimes it might be uncomfortable, but we all have to do our part. And on that note, Madam President, I'd like to open up the floor for questions, comments, etc.
Board members, questions? Go ahead, Mr. Struder, and I'll call on you first.
Thank you, Madam President. Can you hear me good? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Regarding the hybrid model, when will that decision be made so that parents can make childcare plans? Because there's a big difference between a Monday and a Wednesday for childcare options. So is that going to be coming soon?
Yeah, so, I know we indicated the 29th. We're hoping to make a decision before the 29th, so that way, for the point you just raised, we want to be able to give families enough advance notice. So again, we're trying to take in as much input and be collaborative during this process. And I think people have really appreciated that, even when they may have not agreed with a decision. I think the one thing that I like to believe we're doing well is just connecting with as many people as possible and trying to get their take on what this experience is like. So to families, to those, our educators who are watching this evening, please continue to reach out so that way we can make the most informed decision possible.
Mr. Levenstein? Mr. Levenstein?
Thank you, Madam President. I have two questions, please. First, it revolves around the extracurricular, which I guess maybe we'll be talking sports. We have half our students opted out to not to come till February, and there's some sports that's starting in November. So has there been a decision whether those students are eligible to participate in extracurricular? I know they are going to school, remotely, but that will be until February. So that's my first question.
Yeah, all of those things are being taken into consideration, and we do have information that will shortly be going out to all of the students who are, bless you, to all the students who are interested in participating, in this case, the winter season. But I just want to make a quick note in correlation to the question around just extracurriculars in general, whether they're referred to extracurricular or what I would call co-curricular. A lot of, we had students today say, what about clubs? And I think we need to honor that. Right now, we said no to clubs for the month of September, but there may be an opportunity to do virtual clubs. And so, Mr. Levenstein, I know you didn't ask about clubs necessarily, but we are going to look to not only do athletics, but what might be the process to get clubs off the ground, if that's something we can do at this point, whether that's in person or virtual.
Okay, so we haven't made a decision about student athletes, though, that may have practices in November.
Yeah, so there is guidance that has come out, and what I can say is if a school district is in person and then shuts down, those athletes can no longer participate. But we are remote. I believe our students will be able, so let's say, to your point around athletes who are remote through February may still have the opportunity to participate, although they're not in person.
Well, there's a difference if the school district is shut down and it's remote, or someone opting out for remote. But I'll let you figure that out. What's the best direction? My other question revolves around the logistics for busing. Has that been worked out? Because I'm sure it's going to be tricky. I'm sure it's going to be very tricky, and you're going to have a different busing schedule, say Tuesdays and Wednesdays versus Thursdays and Fridays. And has that been done yet, or are we waiting? Because some of this may happen in less than 2 weeks, correct?
No, we will not be participating in any athletics as of right now. And I know that is an option, but we're not in a position to engage in any kind of practices.
No, that wasn't what I was saying. I'm sorry. It's completely different.
So you're meaning hybrid in person.
Yeah, the logistics versus getting the students to the school, October 5th, the plan opening. Has that been worked out with the busing? Because I can imagine that that person is pulling their hair out also. So is that something that's done or working, or a plan in place to inform the parents what days, what times their kids have to be out there, what days they have to be out there?
Yeah, so this is why we are going to make a decision before the 29th, because there's a lot of other pieces connected to it. We're hoping to inform families, and this is our hope. We're hoping to send out information by Thursday or Friday of this week that would be mailed to families. And we're also looking at other options for how families can get the information and not have to wait on the mail. So whether that's just communicating with the school, information on the website. Right now, all of those things are being tied up. And it's our hope that by the end of the week, we'll have information to share out regarding transportation.
Thank you.
Mrs. Santiago?
Thank you, Madam President. I too have a few questions. First, I noticed, Dr., that we added grades 1 and 2 to phase 1, correct? And I was just curious, is it, what brought that about? What thinking, behind there?
Yeah, this is about keeping the primary grades together. And we've been hearing from a lot of families how much their children are struggling. And we have a lot of families that are saying kids need to be in school right now. I get that you want to wait until October, but they should have started early September like other districts. Now, clearly we made a decision that upset some families, and we're hoping that they understand why. We're trying to be careful. And because this is all new, we're trying to learn. But at this point, it's important for us to get our youngest scholars back into in-person instruction. And although it's not every day, I think it's the start, and what I hope will become every day by some point this school year. And that's, fingers crossed, toes crossed. But right now we're thinking it's important to get back our youngest children into in-person instruction for those who didn't opt out.
Thank you so much. And then my next question is, and maybe I don't know if you touched on it, but if we're virtual right now and we're going to go ahead, bring the kids in class, are any of the teachers going to be changing, or are the kids keeping the same? I can't believe that they'd be able to. So have parents been notified of what to expect at the very least?
Yeah, thank you. It's such a critical question. And I could tell you that our administrators have been working so diligently on trying to come up with the plan for October. Now, it will result, and I can't say this with 100% certainty at this moment because principals are working through programs based on the amount of students that opted out. We have a lot of opt-outs. So, and again, another example of pros and cons. Because of the amount of opt-outs, we have to accommodate children who are home probably a little differently than what our normal schooling would be. So in this case, there may be situations that occur that in October results in students getting a different teacher. Now, to some people that makes a lot of sense. To others, they're concerned about that because they want their children to stay with the particular teacher they have at this moment. But it's extremely hard to accommodate all of the requests that we have. And as a result, depending on what program, and we're doing this right now, we've had this discussion, our principals submitted plans on Friday. We had conversations with them yesterday. We met again this morning, determining which students would be in the blue cohort versus the gold cohort, which children are at home, which children are coming in, and what that means in terms of class size for social distancing, and what that means for whether or not a child will stay in a particular cohort with a particular teacher. And those details are still being worked out. But I think it's fair to let families know there is a possibility that their teacher could change. Now, what we're trying to avoid is someone's teacher changing 3 times during the school year. And let me tell you why we're trying to avoid that situation. So we have children who have opted out through the end of January. Because the programs have to change for October, because we're not going to be 100% remote anymore, there's a likelihood some students' teachers might change. And then when we come back after the first semester, we have to monitor what the class sizes are going to be for in-person instruction at that point. And if we don't closely monitor that, there could be a chance, and I'm not saying I'm just trying to be realistic. We don't want a child changing a teacher 3 times in 1 year. And so for that reason, we're trying to minimize as much as possible. And in most cases, students will stay with their current teacher. In other cases, that's not going to be the case. But it shouldn't result in a 3rd teacher in January. And that's what we're working on right now.
Thank you.
Mr. Howard?
Yes, Madam President, thank you. Dr. Lee, I thank you for that presentation. There was a slide where you were talking about the attendance, and I would appreciate it. You know, I think you included the L's, exceptional learners. I think that it would be nice to include the African-American population, because we know where that population is, where we're lagging in that population. And I think that we need to understand and know what that attendance is also, so that we can address that. That's a demographic that we should also include in that slide.
Yeah, I mean, we can look at ESSA groups if that's helpful to the board, and if the entire board wants that kind of information broken down a little differently. But there are Black students in the other groups as well. So there are Black L's and there are
Correct.
Black
exceptional learners.
So, but it's something we can we can further discuss.
It's just information, Doc. It's just us having that information, because we know where those numbers are in our graduation rates. And I think that for us to put some emphasis on making sure that that attendance is up is very important to that community.
I got it.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in before you, Mr. Struder, because you asked one already, right? So I'm going to speak about my mind at this point. Those of you on this board and on this committee know how much I hate vacillating. And many of you listening at home know how much I hate vacillating. I really liked the Monday, Tuesday blue team, Thursday, Friday gold team. And I'll give you a couple of reasons. And this comes from my experience as a principal. I think cleaning the school on Monday, letting kids come in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that's 4 days of not thorough cleaning, is a mistake. I think we really should be cleaning mid-session before the next group comes in, give them a nice clean start, give them a nice clean school. That was our first thought. Stick with it. I really like that thought. In addition, last Thursday, you, Dr. Padilla, Mrs. Maida, and I went to Vales Gate School, and I had the opportunity to talk to their lunch manager there. Wonderful lady, Mrs. Lentz, doing a great job. She talked about 600 people picking up food on Wednesdays in the morning from 8 to 10 at Vales Gate School. They were stocked on the road all the way out onto Route 32. I heard the same thing from Gidney Avenue. They were stopped all the way up Gidney Avenue, people picking up food. People need that ability to pick up food. If you've got parents, you know, I'm not sure that they can be doing that on Monday and get the same number of people and the same number of breakfast and lunches out to the people who really need them. Our community, really, there's a lot of food insecurity, and I really think that we're trying to meet that need in a big way. And I think we should continue to do that in the way that has been effective. And I think that has been on Wednesdays. So I'm going to really advocate for sticking with that Monday, Tuesday, clean and serve food on Wednesday, do virtual on Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday for the other group. I feel very strongly about that. And
Yeah,
now I'll call on Mr. Struder.
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It makes sense. That's what it just makes sense. And so my question is on the update on the filters at the schools. I know that they were ordered, and could you provide us an update as to where they're still not installed, and if they are not installed by the first day that people come back to the buildings, will there be some kind of delay to the opening of school?
I'm going to let Andy weigh in on the first part of that, but let me start by answering the second part of that. As I've indicated, the MERV 13 filters are not mandated. They're not required in order for schools to be in session. And in fact, I don't know anyone who actually has them. But our attempt here was to go above and beyond, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. And that's why we placed the order. And we should have had them already, but they were, on back order. So we don't plan to push back our date because of it. We will, we're going to move forward, and as they come, and right now we're being told they'll come in this month, but let's just say they don't. Let's worst case scenario, they get pushed back again and again. When they do come in, they'll be installed. And when we did the facilities walkthrough last week, we saw many of the ventilators open and people working on them. So we know they're being cleaned. We know they're being, the internals of the ventilators are being worked on, so that way there's no problems when the filters do come in, which is good. But it is our intent at this point to open up schools with them or without them. And it is our goal to put them in place the minute they get here. So Mr. Velez, can you provide the board and the community an update as to where we are?
You got on mute.
Here we go. Thank you, Dr. Padilla. As Dr. Padilla said earlier, the MERV things are not required, and no other school in our area have them. We met about this several times and decided to go with the MERV thing to, like he said, make it better, above and beyond everybody else. We want our schools to be super ready for our students. I've been talking to the filter factory several times. I also called 3 other factories in the United States. There's only 5. And they're having a tough time getting the material for the MERV thing because it's the same material used for N95 masks. There's a shortage of that material. Half of our order is ready. Today, when I talked to them, I asked them to provide us a quote. How much will it cost to ship half of the order directly to us instead of then going to Wappinger Falls to the vendor and then to us? And I am going to get that answer tomorrow. As soon as you receive them, we are going to start the installation in the schools that we get them. Also, the board already approved order for more filters. And I took the liberty today to ask the vendor, if I downgrade our filters to a MERV 10 or 11, can I get them faster? Because the MERV 13 is going to be almost impossible to get them later this year. He said, yes, he doesn't know how fast we can get them, but he said he can get them faster than this order. My goal and my hope is that to have at least half of the schools by the end of the month. That's what they said today. The other half coming in soon after. The factory did receive a shipment today of the material, but I don't know if they were going to put it into our order. Like I said, half of the order is ready and we're hoping to go. Also, Dr. Padilla mentioned the unit filters open, the unit ventilators, and we're doing two different things with the unit ventilators. We did the cleaning, and now the Johnson Control Program is retooling them to get them ready to have individual control so we can monitor the temperature and air in the classrooms remotely. We hope for that is to have them done hopefully by December, all the schools, but I know Roger have 4 schools on the hopper right now to get them ready, and we're hoping to get all this online soon, and the 4 schools that are being installed, they should be ready by mid-October. So our goal is to get them ready. We harassing, for a lack of a better term, the vendor. I continue to give Dr. Padilla, Dr. Spindler updates at least once a day and when we are. And I even promised Dr. Spindler today that when I get them, I'm gonna send her a picture of all the filters. And I'm sure that you guys will get it too. We're trying very hard. We put this order a while ago, but that's the reason for the delay. The Mercer thing filter material is the same one that they use for N95 mask, and that's the priority right now in the country.
Andy, can you just repeat something you just said? So we're expecting to receive the MERV 13s by the end of the month. Is that what they told you?
Half of the order.
Okay.
Mrs. Maida, I'm going to jump to you and then I'll come back to Mr. Howard.
I just wanted to state my opinion. I agree with you about the Wednesday break in the middle of the week for a variety of reasons, and you stated them basically, but I think it's really important to keep that food service schedule the way it has been, because it's so vital to our community. And again, we talked earlier about the deep cleaning, and I think that's really important too. Thank you.
Miss.
No, it should have been lowered, Madam President. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mrs. Burton?
Oh, thank you, Madam President. Back to the scheduling. I would just like to see, well, first of all, Dr. Padilla, I just want to say thank you for being really responsive to our scholars and our families in regards to the outreach, because that's really, really important. And just to piggyback on that, with the upcoming transitional schedule, with the hybrid model, to just also focus on that asynchronous again, right? So that we get a sense of attendance again. So kids don't get a sense of, oh, I have a free day, therefore I don't do work. So I just would like to see that day, the attendance tracked a little closely to make sure we're not, that kids aren't, taking it as if it's a free day off, so to speak. And that's it.
Yeah, fair point. And it is something that we will take a close look at. It is not a free day. It's not a free day for anyone. And we'll just have to reiterate that to our scholars. Because there are a number of things teachers will be responsible for, our administrators will be responsible for, and our scholars. So thank you, Ms. Burton.
Dr. Henderson, I'm going to call on you first because you haven't spoken yet, and then Mr. Struder.
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I just had 2 questions regarding the reopen plan. The first being that I had made a recommendation that the district look to speak with an infectious disease doctor just to review our reopening plan. I was just wondering if that occurred. And my second recommendation, which I had made regarding reopening, was specifically related to parents and how difficult it is managing the current reopening plan model, where the child would be going in-person school 2 days a week, then home for 3, and just the logistics that come with that. So I had recommended that the district look into breaking all the student population down into 3 or 4 cohorts. So that way those cohorts could go to school continuously for larger chunks of time, and then move from cohort A, cohort B, cohort C, and cohort D. Not only do I think it would really help the parents with scheduling for daycare providers, but I also think it would help with cross-contamination. With the current method, current reopen plan, you have cohort A coming either Monday or Tuesday and Wednesday, then cohort B coming either one day in between that or backed up against that. In that scenario, cohort A has all those students have interactions with their families, their friends, their peers, and then cohort B has all those same interactions. So do we really feel that that is the most effective way to prevent cross-contamination with either one day or no day of cleaning in between? And just wondering if that was considered at all. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Henderson, the infectious disease doctor, we did ultimately get Dr. Thomas on board. Maybe not, and then Mr. McLemore can weigh in more on this in terms of his actual specialty. But when you did make that recommendation, we immediately turned to him to get that medical expertise. We have been challenged, by what the best cohorting structure is. And so we've been studying and analyzing so many different plans, and they vary. They vary from one day on, one day off, one day on. And we thought that was just a little too choppy and probably would cause more hardships for families. And kind of where we've landed right now, whether it's a Monday or a Wednesday, and again, they both have pros and cons, and I appreciate the comments that have been made. Just provides us more information in order to make, a solid decision. But we understand, I have spoken to families who have stopped me and have talked about how difficult it is to have trying to figure out how to get 5 days of support when they're working. Right. And that's in the current structure. In the structure that we're moving to, we're only providing them 2 days of in-person. And what we're considering at this point, we're not at we are going to make a public announcement about this because we were trying to collaborate with the Armory to provide an additional location for families who need essentially 4 or 5 days of their child being somewhere. And we think we have a solution for that in-house. And we're just ironing out some details where that could take place. It won't be 4 consecutive days with their teacher, but it could potentially be 4 consecutive days in the school, 2 of those being remote in the building and 2 of them being in the classroom. And again, I'm sure there are tons of pros and cons to that, but we do, to your point, I've been hearing the same thing. This extra relief could go a long way to families who are really struggling right now, trying to pay for daycare, trying to find supervision from, having support from family and friends. And so we're going to be rolling something out, I would say in the next couple of days. We're just ironing out a few details. And I think it won't completely solve what you're saying, but it is an attempt on the district's part to extend a little bit more as much as we can.
Thanks for your consideration. Thank you.
Ms. Van Haren, you're muted, Madam President.
Sorry, Mr. Levenstein. I apologize, everybody. Mr. Levenstein.
Thank you, Madam President. So just a quick question, Mr. Velez. He said that we're due to get half our order by the end of the month. So my question is half our order just enough for half ventilators or enough for most or all? I don't know what the original order is versus the number of ventilators. Do we know that?
Yes, Mr. Levenstein, we order 1,000 filters. We right now are lined up to get 500, so it's half of the ventilators we're expecting to receive sometime next week.
But so how many ventilators do we have? Do we have, not the filters, do we have 500 or do we have 1,000?
No, we have close to 1,000.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Burton, you have your hand up. Do you have a question? Okay. I have a question from Mr. Stridiron, who had to leave. He said, if a student has accommodation, how does that affect the planning if the kids start in person on October 5th?
My guess is he's referring to a medical accommodation. In that case, the child would be home 100% of the time. If it is a different kind of accommodation where the child wants to come to school, if we're able to provide what's being requested, I don't know if that's just extra PPE. My guess it might be something similar to that. So whether it's extra PPE is something, yes, we could do. If it's an accommodation of a child wanting to stay home, we already have that as an option for students, that they can stay home for the first semester.
Well, I'll ask him to refine that in writing, okay? I have a question about teachers who are teaching, who would like to teach virtually. Are they going to be required to be in the classrooms, or will they have an option of teaching remotely from home? And then would that help in the numbers of people in each building?
So I don't know if it will help the numbers at all, but to the first part of the question, it's a case by case. Some of the accommodations are for more PPE. Other accommodations are to be able to work from home. And those are decisions that are still pending at this point.
Board members, any other questions or comments?
All right, I want to thank everyone thank you for your questions. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your ideas. And again, thank you for your support. Obviously, none of this is easy, and we're grappling with a lot of different variables, and we're trying to, again, be as informed to put out the best plan that we possibly can. So that will continue to happen. And I think we're gonna make an announcement before the September 29th. So to our families, just stay tuned. Difficult. Okay, I'm gonna switch over to my next presentation. So just give me a minute to present my screen. All right, so tonight I want to engage our board in a discussion and a presentation around just a fiscal update. I want to thank everyone for their questions and comments that they've submitted, and also just the overall understanding of what we're up against. And throughout the presentation, I'm going to make some some key points as to where we're at, why we've made certain decisions, and what some of the pending decisions are. So as a few of you have heard me say, we're not just dealing with the global health crisis. Yes, everyone is dealing with coronavirus, COVID-19, but at the same time, we're dealing with an economic crisis. New York State is dealing with this crisis. Orange County is dealing with an economic crisis. Our entire country is dealing with an economic crisis. And lastly, based on what you have read, what you hear on the radio, and what you are seeing on TV, there is protests happening all across our country. There's protests happening right in our community as it relates to the civil unrest and systemic racism that exists in our country. And all of these three things are happening all at once. And we are grappling with all three all at once. And sometimes we just got to put that in perspective. If we could just focus on a hybrid model, yeah, we might be further along. Although I think we're in a good space, we could be further along, but as we're dealing with that crisis, we're dealing with the other two at the same time. And again, I just think it's important to acknowledge how mindful our board has been, how mindful and flexible and supportive our parents and guardians have been, how flexible and supportive and committed our faculty and staff have been. And all of those things have been true and more. So I just want to, I think people are understanding that this is not an easy time. And we have never been through this before in this way. And because of that, we're going to get a lot of things right, and we're going to get some things wrong. But we will take the time to step back and reflect and learn. When you look at these three crises, they absolutely have a catastrophic impact on schools. We need funding. We're a district that relies heavily on the state to provide us resources in order for us to educate our children. And each one of these has a significant impact on how we educate children. So there's been a lot of talk. There's been some things written about what this means for what New York State is proposing. I hope everyone understands at this point that the state is facing a cash flow issue of upwards of $13 billion. And as a result, the state is in a position where they have to make some tough choices. And right now, part of the tough decision that is being made is withholding state aid in the amount of 20% across the board for all districts. But what does that statewide decision mean locally to Newburgh? And that is a possible $33.3 million shortfall for Newburgh. So when I say catastrophic, that's exactly what I mean. We're dealing with COVID-19 and the economic crisis and systemic racism all at the same time. So you guys know already how I feel about this. And I have been a champion, not just for Newburgh, but for New York State and across the country about how we need to get this part right. These images should be somewhat clear to you. And that is, let's not confuse what equality means versus equity. When you apply a 20% withholding across every district in the state, that is not equitable. That is equality, and it is grossly unfair. When you apply a 20% to our district versus a wealthy district, that is grossly unfair. And what we need to be focused on as a state is how do we ensure our funding formula is equitable, which in this case means based on student need, you get the resources based on those needs. If you're a district that needs less aid, then you get less aid. If you're a district like ours that needs more, then we should get more. When you start to break this down and look at context, you can see when you look at small city school districts, and I didn't provide all of them, but this is just a good sampling of districts that are around our size and a little smaller. When you look simply at foundation aid, and foundation aid is the biggest revenue source we receive when we look at our aid categories, we're supposed to get $118.5 million. And when you apply a 20% withholding, again, that's 33%. And that's 33% of all total aid. Our total aid package is $166.7 million. So that's 20% of our total aid. However, we're only being funded close to 74% of our foundation aid. So if we were funded 100%, we would be getting a lot more resources to our district. When you look at Orange County, now clearly we're the biggest school district in the region, one of the biggest in the state. But when you look at our county, you can see again how unfair it is to simply apply a 20% withhold on our aid because it impacts us differently. But you'll see in the next slide how it's even more unfair that Newburgh comes in under the county average of 77.4%. So we're not even getting the county average. We're getting less than that. In a minute ago, I said our total aid package was 166.7, of which 118.5 makes up our foundation aid. So I don't want to make assumptions and don't want to take anything for granted, but this slide just highlights for our board and our community what we need to know as it relates to foundation aid. Again, it is our primary formula. That's how New York State funds its schools, predominantly through foundation aid. And what I want to draw your attention to is towards the right, lower right corner, you can see the shares agreement between New York City, Long Island, and then the rest of upstate. And again, here's another example of, is this the right formula? Now, I'm not going to make an argument against New York City because New York City is 1.1 million children, the largest in the country. They should get the lion's share of the resources. I'm not quite sure Long Island should get 13%. And then the rest of upstate school districts get 48%. There's something that seems a little off with that. So we've obviously had to make some tough decisions lately, and I wanted to share with the board and the community some of the things that have taken place and are taking place. And as you know, we had to reduce our part-timers. We have put in a number of freezes on hiring and purchasing. And at this point in the school year, we are freezing extra earnings and overtime. In the spring, we had to offer a retirement incentive to try to realize significant savings for closing the budget gap. And we did that by trying to reduce our FTE numbers through attrition, which I believe is the right thing to do first in order to minimize layoffs. We've asked our administrators to increase class sizes and collapse sections where appropriate. In the spring, we went through a process of reducing our operational expenses in order to save the district millions of dollars, and we're going through the same process yet again. We have formed tier 3 and tier 4 recommendations should it come to that. Now, last week, we were anticipating that we were going to have to bring forward tier 3 recommendations that would have resulted in actual layoffs. However, given the recent news and my conversation with both Senator Skoufis and Congressman Maloney, I've been able to kind of hold off on those recommendations, given that New York State Department of Business is planning to give us our full state aid payment for September. And there's hope that a deal will be struck in Washington that potentially could bring more resources to the school district. But what does this all mean? In a nutshell, we cannot go down in resources. We're a district that relies heavily on state aid, and any reduction will greatly impact us. Now, I'm not sure how obvious this is, but the majority of our school budget, the 287 million of it, predominantly is made up in salaries. And when you're asking a district to shave 10%, 25%, 30%, you cannot do that without avoiding layoffs. Now, this has not been a fun time for us. As we're trying to gear up for in-person instruction, we've also had to deal with the reality that we may have had to reduce our workforce. That's difficult. It's not a fun position to be in when you're considering laying off anyone, and it is not something that we take lightly. Another quick note here is that we've already been shortened 20% for our June and August payments. So we had every reason to believe the same was going to happen in September. It also means that we have to continue to explore areas where we can reduce, both in FTE and in services, as well as look at how we might go about increasing the tax levy for next year and how we will go about using reserves. So some consideration of things we will need to consider in the event we don't get our full state aid payment for September, or we don't get our full aid payment in November, December. And what I have communicated to our faculty and staff is that for right now, we're going to hold off on recommendations for layoffs. However, if we don't get our full state aid payment for September, we will have to advance those recommendations. And if we don't get our full aid payment in, in the winter, we will probably be back here again, having to figure out what mid-year layoffs would be. And so you can see here, we're looking at continuing to advocate, and we're doing that. We're looking at out-of-classroom teachers, returning them back to the classroom, repurposing staff, restructuring schools, restructuring pre-K if needed. Now, why is pre-K in this case being isolated and PTech? Is because they're funded primarily through grants. So the state has not given us any indication that they're going to provide us our allocation for pre-K or PTech. Now, I don't want to strike fear. This is us trying to be transparent and be open and honest with our community, that we may have to face some really tough decisions in the very near future if the state does not provide us the grant money needed in order to keep these programs up and running. We're trying to consolidate services. We're analyzing the master program. We're looking at new revenue sources. So whether that be the flexibility that's being provided in the capital reserve or others, those are things that we are going to have to figure out. And what do we know at this point? Some of this I've already highlighted for you. New York State is projecting a $13 billion through $66 billion deficit by 2024. Let's see if that's what really happens, but that's what the Department of Business is projecting at this point. We do know that at the end of the month, the Department of Business is going to present a plan that we hope takes into account the elimination of this blanket 20%. And we already know that we've been reduced 20% for June and August. And the news that's coming out at this point is that the economy in New York is slowly starting to open, such as in certain areas of the state, dine-in eating will be allowed at the end of the month. We do know there's a lot of traction taking place in Washington, D.C. right now, but maybe most people don't know that the HEROES Act, which is a big stimulus package, has been sitting in the Senate for now months without it being brought to the floor for a vote. There's a new package of $1.5 million that has been introduced with clear packages going towards schools and local municipalities. And my 2 cents, for whatever it's worth, this is critical. We have national politics impacting local decisions. And our politicians need to stay in Washington until a deal is done. And then the tagline at the very bottom, I hope is pretty obvious to everyone. And that is, the state's financial crisis is not our scholars' fault, but it is our reality and what we're grappling with right now. So our estimations at this point, as it relates to operations, we believe we can realize $3.4 million by making the following reductions. And again, these aren't things that we want to do. These are things we feel we have to do at this point in order to keep the cash flow moving forward, in order to have particular savings, in order to have certain operations continue that we need. As it relates to personnel, you heard from Mr. Tyndall earlier this in the board meeting that this particular year, there's no decision yet on subsequent years, but at least for this one, there won't be an SRO, and that saves the district $100,000. And not by filling vacancies that we have. And these are vacancies not assigned to children. So for that reason, we feel comfortable making the necessary reductions in order to realize the 1.5 million and not filling the vacancies. Needless to say, this does not put the board, myself, and my team in a very comfortable position. And it is going to be a balancing act the entire year. And I know that there have been a number of employees saying, well, how come we're not using the reserves? And I believe it's just a differing of opinion and strategy. We believe we're going to have to use the reserve at some point. But because there's so many variables still lingering this school year, we need to get through where we're at right now before we consider the reserves. And this is our attempt to show the board and the community that we are squeezing and reducing as much as we can now before having to tap into the reserves. And as I have continued to present already, we can't tap into the reserves one time and deplete everything. This is a 3 to 5 year process on how we might have to use the reserves. So we have to be extremely strategic and be conservative for some parts of how we use the reserves, so that way we're not cutting ourselves short later on. Because I believe in you, because I believe in my team, because I believe in our scholars, our community, our faculty and staff, I think we can succeed our way out of this. I think we can succeed our way out of facing 3 crises at the same time. And so on that note, I'd like to stop here, Madam President, and open up the floor for questions and comments.
Board members, any questions or comments? Mr. Levenstein?
Just a quick comment, and I'd like to thank the superintendent and the staff too, that they pulled back the proposed staff reduction that we had last week. And I hope the state continues to fund without reducing any of our payments to the district, so we don't have to go through that again. And that would be wonderful if we can plan on that, but I know we can't plan anything now. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam President.
Any other, Mr. Howard, I see your hand is up.
Yes, Madam President, I would just like to dovetail on that. I was so happy that the proposed cuts didn't go through, but one thing I would like for us to try to understand, and not just, the board, but central office, the unions in the district, the community, the families, I think we need to rally around and get our message to our local assemblymen, our local senators, and to our governor. And we need to put letters together. We need to, whatever we need to do to collectively get the message to Albany and to our elected officials that we don't want to revisit that idea, or that the whole ideas of making cuts in our district and laying people off. I think we should find a way to do that. So I don't know how we can do it as a board, Madam President, but if we can rally the community around and get a letter writing campaign, take it up to Albany, put it on our assemblyman or our senator's desk, and let them know that we don't want that to happen here. But we got to do it collectively. And I just want to say it's about, Team Newburgh, Goldbacks, NFA, Newburgh, and Large City School District rallying around each other, coming together to fight this off so that we don't have to even entertain those ideas in the future.
Thank you. I agree, Mr. Howard. It's about us working all together in a unified effort. Anybody else? Anybody other comments? Mr. Walker? Mr. Walker, unmute yourself, please. We cannot hear you. Mr. Walker, we cannot hear you. Can you press the space bar, Mr. Walker? Maybe that will help.
He gave up.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Padilla. I think that's it.
All right. Madam President, I just want to thank you for your leadership during this time. Thank you for just understanding the many, many challenges that Newburgh is up against, but you've been understanding that this is something everyone is facing, and just want to acknowledge you for your leadership during this time. We have one more presentation, a quick one about our capital project, and I will ask Mr. Ramjug and our CPL representative.
Pardon me, Dr. Padilla. Mr. Walker's got his mic off.
Okay.
We can hear you, Mr. Walker.
All right. Yes, I'm very sorry. I don't know what's going on with my computer, but I just wanted to say that I wanted to piggyback on what had been said before, that that we can use this time as a community to really come together. As long as we keep in mind, I think our mantra should be people first over buildings, people first over systematic racism, people first over the COVID and hunger. And as a community and as a former teacher in this district, I'm so proud of us, and I have great expectations of how we can be a model of what to do in situations of this type, because we know, because we're so diverse, we have to choose people first over anything else that might exist, that may come along. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Okay, can Clark Patterson Lee, do we have Lauren with us this evening and Mr. Ramjug?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Padilla. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This evening's capital improvement presentation is the third in a series of presentations that began this past summer, including our new Korean Tech Education Center, Heritage addition and alterations at Heritage Middle School, as well as New Windsor's addition and alterations. This evening, we'll be presenting on the capital improvement plan for Vales Gate Elementary School. But before I turn it over to Ms. Lauren Tarzio from Clark Patterson Lee, I just wanted to give you a brief update that the NFA swimming pool renovation is well underway. Approximately 50% of the demolition is completed, and that the next major step is to excavate the base of the pool to get access to the ruptured pipe that originally caused the draining of the pool. In addition, there were also a question as to whether we could fiscally afford to include the girls and boys locker room as part of the pool project. And we explored alternatives further in terms of value engineering. The Palumbo group did an excellent job with respect to negotiations. And it is very possible that we can include that work and under budget, I might add. So between now and the next board meeting in October, we will be pulling together all of that research and information and sharing it with all of you for your consideration. So if there are no further questions on that piece, I'm going to turn it over to Clark Patterson Lee. Lauren?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Tonight, we'll be reviewing the Vales Gate plans. As you know, we've already reviewed CTE, New Windsor, and Heritage, and this is the last of the buildings that we're currently working on during these initial phases of the project. So as you can see with this slide, the scope of work in this building is to demolish the modular addition and then provide an addition pretty much in the same place that would accommodate the lost spaces of that modular. And in addition to that, we would be building a canopy in the main entrance to highlight that entrance as the main entrance. As you know now, it's not the focal point of the building. It's really going around the back for the entranceway. So next slide, please. So here we're looking at a site plan. I don't think you can see my cursor here, but on the very right-hand side where it says 49 parking spaces, you can see there's a bit of an outline of where the modular is currently. We'll be demolishing that. The block in yellow is the addition that would replace it. And then we have parking in the place as well. So what we're doing is combining the two, the bus loop and parking lot together in the front. We're creating enough parking to accommodate all of the staff members plus some visitor spaces, and then have enough room to stack all of the buses in the bus loop. Next slide. So here's a floor plan. You can see, again, in yellow, the addition. So this is spaces that were in the modular that are going to be going away, and then we'll be replacing them in that addition. More permanent structure. And then everything in blue is the spaces that we would be renovating. These are major renovations. This isn't BCS work, There's a whole nother layer of building condition survey work that we'll be doing in the building. And that includes electrical upgrades and HVAC upgrades. And as you know, there was a whole separate referendum just to do HVAC upgrades and air conditioning and filtration. So in blue, we have renovation to the library space. We'll be taking the nurses space and renovating that into a STEM lab, renovating the current computer lab into a science classroom, and then upgrading the cafetorium finishes and the stage. So we'll get new lighting, rigging, and curtains in the stage. Next slide. So here's an enlarged plan of the addition. So as you know, there were a couple of music classrooms, there are some speech rooms. We do have to relocate the nurse's office since we'll be occupying that space with the STEM lab. So that will all be housed in this addition. Next slide. So our next steps will be to meet with the user groups and go over the finishes. We have some concepts here that we've been doing with each of the buildings, and we'd like to start providing similar finishes throughout the district so that there's really a branding that goes on throughout the district. So this is one of the spaces, and this is just to give you a flavor of what we're looking at as far as finish selections. Next slide. So along with doing these palettes, we're also providing these images that can give people ideas and start getting those juices flowing about ideas and how these spaces could look. Next slide. And we're doing this for every space and every building. So if we want to just sort of click through the next few slides just to get a flavor of what we're looking at doing, this would be for the cafeteria. This is for the STEM lab. And then this is an idea for the STEM lab. And I believe that is it. So I hope I made this short and sweet for you guys. Are there any questions?
Board members, any questions? I don't see anybody's hands.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Thank you, Lauren. Madam President, that concludes my items for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Badia. We're going to move on to my section next, but we're going to have a Mineo minute. So everybody just take a moment and stand up because everybody needs to stretch. Come on.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, it looks like everybody's back. Thank you. And I'm glad everybody took a little stretch. That was really good. I have items number 3.1 through 3.5 as a consent agenda. Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Oh, wait, I see Mrs. Maida's hand. Mrs. Maida, do you want to separate out anything, please? You're muted, honey. You're muted. We can't hear you.
Sorry. Could we separate out 3.2? I have a comment for that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I'd like a motion on items 3.1 and then 3.3 through 3.5.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, questions or discussion on those items? Roll call on those items, please.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes,
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Walker. You hit the mute button, Mr. Walker. There you go.
Yes.
Thank you.
we're going to move on to item 3.2, which is the secondary grading policy. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on this item? Mrs. Maida?
You're muted, Ms. Maida.
I'd like to look at the section that says communication to students. And I have a comment or a request. I'm not sure how you look at it. It says that all formal and informal assignments must be clearly stated in the syllabus and course outline. And what I would like to consider is giving, changing that just a little bit, and I don't know if this is the right time or how we can do this, to give teachers some flexibility to change assignments based on the progress of the students. So perhaps teachers might have to change.
Point of order, Madam President. Point of order.
Yes.
I can't hear
Mrs.
anything.
Maida.
Can't hear
Mrs.
anything.
Maida.
Or reteach.
Mrs. Maida?
And with that said, the assignments may have to change.
Mrs. Maida?
I think I caught some of what she was saying. She's saying teachers having the autonomy to change.
Specific students that they're teaching.
Mrs. Maida, we can't hear you and we can't understand you.
Not sure how we would go about that, whether we revisit that in policy, but that's the comment that I wanted to make.
Mrs. Maida? Mrs. Maida, nobody understood anything that you said.
Can you hear me now?
No. Okay, Mr. Ford, I see you have your
Yes,
hand.
can you hear me?
Mrs.
Can you hear
Maida, hang on.
Oh, I believe I heard bits and pieces of what Mrs. Maida was requesting. I think she is requesting that we.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Mrs. Maida, Mr. Forget is speaking.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Is it, am I not going, you can't understand what I'm saying?
No.
All right.
So hang on. Go ahead, Mr. Forget.
Yes. You can't.
Mr. Forget, would you like to try to pick that up, please?
Sure. So I think what I heard Mrs. Maida say was that she would like us to consider bringing this back for further conversation. I think one of the areas that she's concerned about is in the particular page that speaks to communication to students. I believe part of that should be similar to the elementary policy. It should say communication to students as well as parents and families and guardians. But I also think that there needs to be some discussion around the syllabus and course outlines. So when we talk about the syllabus and course outlines, some of those still need to, a lot of those still need to be created. So when we do the regulation, there needs to be the creation of the syllabus and outlines. So we will probably enact this beginning during the second semester courses, so that in the following year, this will go for full implementation.
Okay, Mr. Forget, then what would your suggestion be? Should we table this one and bring it back, or do you want to?
I think it can be addressed through the regulation, but I'm willing
I
to
agree.
do whatever the board decides.
It
Who
sounds
said
like
they
what
agreed?
yeah, hi, Ms. Maneo. So I think based on the pieces that I heard are things that we can address in the regulation.
You're muted, Ms. Maneo.
Mrs. Maida, did you hear how they would like to address your concern? Through the regulation? Just nod.
You hear now? I tried to go back at, you can't hear me. All right, go ahead. I'm fine.
Okay, so I'd like to entertain, we have a motion, yes. We have discussion. Any other discussion on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Dr. Henderson,
Dr. Anderson, sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Maneo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items. We're going to move to our Assistant Superintendent for Student Support Services, Dr. Roman.
Good evening, Madam President. Under the Student Support Services agenda, we have one item, recommendations from CSE, CPSE committees for the board's consideration.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Mr. Forget, your hand is up. Do you have a question?
No, I'm sorry, it was from the last time. We'll fix it.
Thank you. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida, Ms. Maneo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Walker. That's a yes. Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Madam President. That's all for Student Support Services.
Thank you, Dr. Roman. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Dr. Spindler.
Thank you, Madam President. Finance presents items 5.1 through 5.5 as a consent agenda for your consideration.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maneo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker, you're muted.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
That concludes my items for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Spindler. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Mr. McLemore.
Thank you, Madam President. On the Human Resources agenda, I have items 6.1 through 6.4 for your consideration.
Do we have to amend these items?
Point of order. So 6.1 has to be voted on separately, and then 6,
Okay.
2, 3, and 4 are the consent.
So let's separate out 6.1. We'll do that in a minute. Let's start with 6.2 to 6 and 6.3. Yeah, and 6.4. Would any member like to separate out?
Point of
any
order.
those?
Point of
Yes?
order, Madam President.
Yeah.
6.1 needs to be approved by the board first, and then 6.1 amends the 6.2 agenda item.
Okay, thank you. So 6.1, I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So
I'd like to entertain a motion, please, on 6.1.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on 6.1?
Can 6.1 be displayed at this point since it's added?
Yeah, this Tom, roll down to item E. That's the agenda item that's been added. Civil service appointments, part-time food service workers, recall, effective October 5th.
Okay. Any other comments or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Maida. Moving right on. Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Can you hear me now?
Mr. Walker?
Mr. McCoy, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, is that a yes for Ms. Maida? Is that a yes? Okay.
Yes.
Burton? Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Dr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein?
Yes.
Item passes.
Thank you. We're going to move on to items 6.2 through 6.4. Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Santiago?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Dr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein?
Yes.
Ms. Maida?
Yeah.
All right. Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
That concludes my items, Madam President.
Yes.
Thank you.
Did you hear me?
Thank you, Mr. McLemore. We're going to move on to our clerk of the board, Mr. McCoy.
Thank you, Madam President. I have the approval of the minutes from September 8th, 2020.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Dr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein?
Yes.
Ms. Maida?
Yes.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Ms. Santiago?
Yes.
That concludes my items, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. And thank you, everybody, for having patience with us and being a good audience and being a good board. I'd like to entertain, before we do that, on the next board agenda, there will be instructions on public participation. So please read that and get ready for public participation in October. So now I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting, please.
Madam President, before you do that, can we just publicly acknowledge Miss Ann Lytle, that tonight's her last official board meeting in the district. And we just want to say, Ann, that we will miss you. Congratulations on your retirement. You won't be sitting in Zoom meetings anymore, at least. So that's something to look forward to, right?
Yes, thank you so much.
Service.
Yeah.
And we appreciate everything you've done for the district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Beneo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.